work here at the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. I'm Kimberly Ficklin, your host. And every week we talk to professionals just like you all around the world because we want to find out what they do to create a profitable business, the kind of business where people really want to work. Happy Healthy Day, everyone. Today we are talking to Michelle Dickinson. Michelle's the author of the book, Breaking Into My Life. Michelle's a passionate mental health advocate, a TED speaker, and a published author of a memoir entitled Breaking Into My Life. After years of playing the role of child caregiver, Michelle embarked on her own healing journey of self-discovery. Her memoir offers a rare glimpse into a young girl's experience living with and loving her bipolar mother. Michelle spent years working to eradicate the mental health stigma within her own workplace by elevating compassion, causing more open conversations, and leading real change in how mental illness is understood in the corporate setting. She also knows firsthand what it feels like to struggle with a mental illness after experiencing her own depression due to challenging life events. Michelle recently concluded her 19-year pharmaceutical career, and she has emerged with a strong desire to positively impact the mental health landscape. So first, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you for having me, Kimberly.
Oh, I'm really excited about this one. So we're going to be raffling off one of Michelle's signed copies of her book. So that's going to be really exciting. So stick around to the end of the show to find out how to enter the raffle to win one of Michelle's books, Breaking Into My Life. So the book Breaking Into My Life is a personal memoir, but today we're going to chat about Michelle's passion for driving real change within corporate culture so that people with invisible disabilities can be themselves and feel accepted and supported in the workplace. Okay, Michelle, I know that you were previously with Johnson & Johnson as an associate director. So talk to us a little bit about how you got from there to here.
Absolutely. So I had a wonderful 19-year career in the pharmaceutical industry and recently was with J&J and left. My position itself was eliminated. Lots of corporate restructuring happening. So I looked at this as a tremendous opportunity to do sort of my side hustle as my real job, because this is truly where my passion is and where my heart has been. So I had an amazing opportunity to be a part of launching a mental health employee resource group when I was there. And for 2 years, we expanded and grew that resource group to really shift the culture within the company. And it was a tremendous learning experience and opportunity for me to make a direct impact on people's lives that I was working with. So just like when opportunity knocks, a choice to listen, and that's what I'm doing. I have that experience within the ERG space, and then my own personal experience understanding what it feels like to have a mental illness and to try to keep the smile on going to work and struggling with depression because of my own life challenges. So those two experiences, and then I grew up with a bipolar mom. I feel like I now have like all three lenses on the situation, and I'm really committed that there be more compassion in the workspace. So those struggling with invisible disabilities can really show up and be the best contribution that they can be and feel supported, understood, and receive the compassion that they deserve.
Well, I love that mission. You're the trifecta of compassion with the three things, ways that you're involved in this. And it does give you a really good perspective, I'm sure, because most of us don't have, aren't involved in that in three ways. We either are dealing with a loved one with the problem, we are dealing with ourselves, or we're dealing with someone at work.
Right.
And you have all three. That's a really interesting combination. So talk to me a little bit about, your bio says that your book is about a young girl's experience living with her bipolar mother. So that tells me that you entered the workforce already having this stigma behind you and not being able to talk to anybody. So chat with us a bit about the struggles, first of all, of an employee that is dealing with this type of issue.
For me, I must have entered the workplace at some point in my 20s. My first job was at IBM. And I basically stayed home, worked locally so that I could look after my mom, even in my 20s. And it wasn't something that we spoke about. It was something that you concealed, something that you kind of kept to yourself. You didn't want anyone to know about it. There's a lot of embarrassment, but yet there was a lot of stress around how do I take care of my loved one and keep myself together? I think caregivers in general can get lost in caring for those that they love and not even realize that they're compromising their own well-being because they're coming from such a loving and caring space. So, there's that piece. But I think that, in general, people who have a loved one with mental illness, it's really hard to really get the care that they need for their loved one and then get the care that they need for themselves and then stay focused at work. If you are unable to perform your role at work, that's kind of like, oh, it's a performance issue. It's like, I think that the challenge that we have that we need to task people leaders with is to really take a step back and say, is it a performance issue, or are they just like overflowing with responsibility and stress and strain from what they're struggling to deal with at home? So, I think that's very real. And then when I was at J&J, the opportunity that I had was to step onto the TEDx J&J stage in a fairly conservative space and courageously tell my story. And that was where there was an access for me to begin to heal. I had the story around my mom and didn't really speak about it, but something pulled me to tell my story on the TED stage and really share what it was like to love someone with a mental illness throughout my childhood, my young adult years, and the reception that I received, the compassion, the love, the interest. People were interested in talking about mental health. I had opened the door for people to want to talk about something that was so taboo. And with that came inspiration to sit down and begin to write my memoir.
So after your TEDx talk, were you met with a different attitude than you expected?
So at that point, my mom had passed away, right? I had shared the very graphic details of being cared for by someone who was bipolar, which included abuse. So I will say I had many colleagues who were very uncomfortable by my level of sharing and my vulnerability, looking the other way, not acknowledging that I had just shared, like whatever. They just weren't comfortable. They weren't willing to engage that I had shared my story so openly. And then I had other colleagues who were so sweet and generous and kind and complimentary for having the courage to do that. And that actually, I think, as the TED events progressed, people started to become more and more vulnerable. And I think therein lies the opportunity. When we want to humanize something like mental health, you need the people who are courageous enough to take the stage, stand on that red dot, and really vulnerably share, because what that creates is humility, like a connection, a story where people can relate and people can actually, maybe not fear it so much and engage in that conversation that was so uncomfortable. Because you can relate to someone when they tell a story versus, hey, look at the data.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Especially when somebody a peer, a colleague or something, and you're like, wow, I never knew.
Yeah.
I never knew. And in a workplace setting, like you said, it seems like, I guess, a weird place to be so transparent, for lack of a better word, just to get up and say something in front of people that they didn't know about you, that is so personal.
Yeah, because, so like I want to fast forward to when I had my depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
It takes something. And I'm not alone. There's a lot of people in the workplace who are struggling with some type of mental illness who are terrified that their manager find out, that their peers find out, because they will be perceived as being less than, being weak, being incapable of perhaps taking on a task or being considered for a promotion. They're terrified. So it takes something for you to be vulnerable and to really bring your authentic self to work. There needs to be a safe space for you to feel like you could do that. So your leader needs to step up, create that compassionate environment, and you need to have that, feel that there's a support there, that you're comfortable to disclose that, I'm dealing with something. I'm not Superwoman over here. I have a lot on my plate. I'm dealing with this and I'm doing the best I can. Thank you for meeting me where I am. But it takes a culture to be there for that person to be open and honest.
I completely agree with that. And when we chatted before, I had let you know that, I've suffered some trauma in my life and have an illness, a silent illness, as they call it, right? And I never tell people all my struggles, and they'll ask, oh, tell me. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, you don't want to know. You probably really don't want to know the details. And they're like, oh, just, they're like, sure I do. Of course I do. And the minute that I go to start telling somebody, I can see a physical reaction to my story. They're like, oh, it makes them really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then I pull back from telling the story. I tell myself, see, that's why I don't say things, because people don't quite understand it, and they're not used to that kind of a story. So for people that have these stories, like you said, to stand up on a TEDx stage, tell everybody in your workplace, everybody to hear in public, is really a strong thing to do. And to get this conversation started is a really impressive thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're dealing with depression.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find your way in the workplace to get out of that? Did you have a support system?
Yes and no, right? I tried to lead by example and disclose. I thought we have a culture that's open and receptive to this, and I'm going to disclose this. And I did. And I guess I wish things could have been a little bit different, but yet I'm so appreciative for the progress that I witnessed when I was there. So it's twofold. I think the thing that I learned that I would love to share with other companies is you could have a remit and senior leaders shouting at the rooftops that we have a remit, that we're going to create a more inclusive, compassionate workspace. But if your people leaders are not in tune with that, and they don't have the compassion and the connection and create that space that echoes what is being promoted at the highest levels, the impact is so profound. The employee's experience is that of their leader, their immediate leader, the one that they interact with every day. So if they don't have that alignment, that's where there is a misstep. So I think for me, I had friends, I had family, I had a loving, supportive community around me, and I had an amazing therapist who helped me navigate it. So I came out okay. There's a lot of people who struggle. And I mean, there's a lot of people that wind up losing their jobs because on the surface, their leaders, they're not performing. They're just not measuring up. They're not meeting the expectation. We're going to put them on a PIP. We're going to usher them out of the company. And I think that's where they do such a disservice to someone, because if that person rolled into work in a wheelchair a day after horrible accident, I don't think that they would handle it that way. I think they would say, hey, what can we do to make it a better experience for you so you can really be a contribution where you are?
That is a very good point, Michelle. Trust that what your employee is telling you is true, first of all, because like you said, I think because these things are silent, that sometimes people just go pshaw, oh yeah, sure, you're depressed. We're all depressed. It's kind of like that, right? But if you pulled up in a wheelchair the next day, they would think differently. And so it's the trust of that your employee is telling you something that is true to them.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. Mm-hmm.
They're disclosing. And when you said that, to be a leader and you disclose first, I love that you said that, because I operate within a feedback loop where the first piece of that feedback loop is self-disclosure. Mm-hmm. And so that's the way that you become vulnerable to someone. And you can offer feedback by saying, first, I want to let you know this about me. And then you have a conversation with people. It's really life-changing. It's really thinking about things at a much more deeper level.
Yeah, I recently met with an organization that I'm really, really fond of. And I spoke to one of the people there. They handle mostly mental health programs in the workplace. And I said, how do you deal with a leader who's so resistant to including mental health in the conversation for their people? How do you reach them, aside from the dollars that are attached to disability that are absolutely affecting a company, whether or not they choose to look at it? How do you reach them? And he's like, it's hard. He's like, because at the end of the day, what we do here is we're basically teaching compassion. And I was like, wow, took me back to the emotional intelligent conversations back in the day where, are you EI? Are you EI? But he was so black and white about it. He's like, basically, Michelle, you know what we're doing? We're going out and we're teaching compassion in a world where deadlines and business deliverables trump. We're having to take a step back and teach compassion. And I thought, wow, it's amazing.
It is amazing. People don't seem to understand what empathy is anymore. And that's a big buzzword in workplace culture right now, right? Is really teaching people how to be empathetic to each other. It's interesting how I don't know whether we've lost it or we just don't cultivate it, or we're just unaware that it's an important thing to have empathy. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but you brought up a good point. Because, of course, one of the questions I was going to say is, what do we do? How do we get our leaders moving? But you brought up a really good point in that, and we talk about this all the time, is those frontline leaders how do you take a culture that has not been doing this, and now all of a sudden the CEO or whoever, okay, we're going to do it this way now. And there's no buy-in there. And they say, well, what are we supposed to do with our leaders? What are we supposed to do? And I'm actually going to have a conversation with someone about this in a future podcast, is unfortunately fire good people. If you have a frontline leader that is not on board with the new mission or the new vision of the company, where culture and empathy and emotional intelligence are in play, then you're probably not in the right place anymore. And if a company can understand that sometimes you have to fire good people to get, I don't want to say better people, but the people you're looking for in that place.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think fundamentally, so what can you do? I'm going to go back to that question. I think fundamentally, we are so guarded and we so are careful. We're almost too careful. I think we need to be courageous enough to check in with each other. Are you okay? Something as basic as, are you okay? How are you doing today? Okay, we'll get to the work, but I first need to look in your eyes and say, are you doing okay? How you doing? And just checking in with one another. I had a friend who reached out to me who suddenly lost a colleague to suicide. And not one employee that had worked with that woman the day before she committed suicide had any indication that she was not well. So those are the types of instances that I'm actually out to prevent, right? No one should have to deal with the fact that they thought that their colleague was okay on the surface, but they were struggling deeply within enough to lose their life. So I think, we all could do, the first step we could all do is start checking in legit, like, are you okay? And make sure that our peers are okay. I think the other thing that is super powerful is storytelling. In some way, having, some of those employees who are courageous enough to share, because through storytelling, it creates a less threatening space and more open dialogue. And I think that if you want to remove a stigma in a company, you need that dialogue to happen, right? You need someone to be courageous. It could be a leader. It could be a senior leader who witnessed mental health, because the reality is we're all affected at some point in some way by a loved one or ourselves by mental health. It's just whether or not we have the courage to talk about it that opens the door to more conversation, that removes the stigma.
That's the key right there. That is the key. But then, okay, so how do you create a forum where your employees can step up and storytell? So talk to me about, was Johnson & Johnson the one that created the TEDx? Was it their TEDx, or were you actually working within a city?
No, they had their own license. So it was a stage for sharing ideas. Ideas were sharing, and it was all kinds of ideas. It just happened to be that quite a few of my colleagues who had connections and experiences with mental health challenges took the stage and told their story. And that was super powerful. But it doesn't have to be a TED stage. It could just be, leveraging World Mental Health Day coming up on 10/10. There's a perfect opportunity. Let's have a panel discussion. Let's have some folks within the company, maybe your EAP leader can talk about resources. Maybe a colleague wants to talk about a loved one and how stressful it is to care for that loved one and work full time. Because the reality is everyone is affected by mental health when there is mental illness in the family. So it could be that. It could just, it could be that. It could be pre-recorded vignettes. It could be any kind of small group discussions that start a conversation that wasn't going to happen. I mean, it could be as little or as big as you wish, but it all starts with conversation.
Okay, so I'm the owner of a company.
Yeah.
And this now has come to my attention because I've listened to this amazing podcast called The Happy Healthy Workplace, where this amazing lady, Michelle, talked to us about mental health stigma in the workplace. So now I'm thinking, okay, I need to make a change in my workplace. So I just asked you, what can you do? Facilitate that conversation. But let's break it down a little bit. Even what's the first step, Michelle? I'm that CEO and I want to do it. And right now I'm thinking, what can I do?
Yeah.
What is the thing I can do myself first that will allow my employees to follow me?
Yeah. If you truly are a leader and want to have an inclusive workspace, you need to include invisible disabilities. So I would urge you to consider the last piece in the diversity puzzle is invisible disabilities, and shining a light on those invisible disabilities and demonstrating that there's a remit to really be an inclusive culture, and stating that mental health is going to be something that is a priority for the organization is a very, very good first step. because then your leaders can get behind that. And then you can create, different activities and different programs that support that vision. That is a great first step.
That is a great first step. I love that. And then working with someone who understands how to put something like this in place, because, you don't want to miss the little steps that you don't really know about, or maybe you had previously thought about. So I think it's important that you're going to bring in someone that really knows how to help you facilitate something like this.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm Mr. CEO or Mrs. CEO again. I might feel uncomfortable doing this. I might think it's something I really need to do in my workplace. Like, oh my gosh, that lady Michelle, she was so right. I need to do this, but I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's really checking in on your own relationship to mental health. We all have our own biases and it is scary, but there are proven programs out there. I know of quite a few organizations because I've been involved and I was out sitting on panel discussions representing the company when I was there. I'm very connected to a lot of wonderful organizations that have programs. They have peer-to-peer programs. They can train your employees. They have manager training that they can train your managers on, ways that you can safely support employees with mental illness so that there's not a fear of legal concerns. First have to be willing to say, okay, we want to do more. We know we need to do more. And it starts with education and it starts with support. And, the employee resource group within the company was the fastest growing resource group. And it was all employee volunteers raising their hand. So it was kind of like just create the space, and your employees, you might be very surprised that they raise their hand and say, all right, I want to be a part of creating a stigma-free culture here because it matters, and just watch it unfold and just provide support.
Well, that is a good space right there, the employee research group. And you're right. I talk about this on the podcast all the time. There are leaders at every level. So we talk about frontline leaders all the time. We talk about the C-suite, but there are leaders that will step up in your company at every level. And there are leaders who are wishing right now that you would put in place a program like this for them and for their peers. So that's a great way to get started. I love all of this, is really amazing, but we're going to have to come to a close here soon. So what I'm going to ask you, Michelle, is there anything that you think needed to be said that we didn't say today?
Yeah. So first of all, I would love to work with companies, share with them the knowledge that I've gained over the past few years and being in this space and being so connected to what worked and what didn't work at such a big company. So please reach out to me through my website, which is michelledickinson.com. You can reach out to me there. I would love to have the opportunity to talk to you about it. The thing that I learned through a couple of different experiences over the course of the last month is that when companies want to do something around mental health, the first thing that they say that they want to do is, oh, let me just create a mental health first aid training opportunity for employees. They can go and they can get this first aid, mental health first aid. We could check the box and say they're all certified in mental health first aid, and then everyone's great. Actually, that might not be the best thing to do. You want to make sure that you understand that mental health first aid training is very clinical in nature and has terminology that can actually exacerbate the stigma. So I want to caution organizations that think mental health first aid training is the way to go, because there are so many other amazing options out there. And I'm happy to share those with you because I'm connected to so many different groups that can really provide a strategic plan to help the organization move in the direction they want to go to. So I kind of see that as a misstep if that's the only thing that an organization is looking to do.
Well, I had not even ever heard of first aid training like that.
Yeah.
So that's good. That is a really great tip, because that might be the only thing that people know to reach out to. So that's wonderful. So I'm glad that you are offering up that anybody can get a hold of you and chat with you. I know this is a very important conversation for you. Reach out to Michelle for sure. Michelle, this has been a great conversation. I am positive that you and I could talk for hours about this. So we'll have to invite you back to the show again and get in maybe even a deeper dive, or maybe go a little bit further than where we were able to go today in our half an hour. But it was wonderful. I thank you so much for being a guest and bringing your wonderful information.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So listeners, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, we're going to raffle off one of Michelle's books, Breaking Into My Life. So what you can do is go to thehappyhealthyworkplace.com/breaking into my life, and the raffle will be there. I'm going to have it up for a week after this podcast airs, And then I will let the winner know via email. And that'll be really exciting and fun. So we appreciate you donating a book for that, Michelle. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Again, this is the close of the Happy Healthy Workplace podcast. Please look at the show notes for all of the links, including all of the different ways that you can get a hold of Michelle, her TEDx talk, and the way to purchase her book if you're not the one that wins it. Until next time, we wish you a happy, healthy day. That's a wrap for today. The Happy Healthy Workplace podcast is now complete. Be sure to subscribe and join us weekly for secrets, solutions, or strategies that help you create a profitable business where people really want to work. This is Kimberly Ficklin, wishing you a happy, healthy day.